Hello everyone, and welcome to my The Bold Fans channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Deacon Sharp sat alone in his small, dimly lit apartment above Il Giardino, the restaurant he'd given his all to run. The air was thick with the aroma of stale coffee and regret. His fingers traced the rim of a chipped mug that Sheila had always used when she stayed over. It had cracked now, just like everything else in his life. The news had hit him like a freight train. Sheila Carter, the woman he'd loved despite her chaos, and Taylor Hayes, the woman he'd never intended to hurt, were both gone from his life in ways he couldn't undo. He had slept with Taylor, and Sheila was done with him. The weight of his choices pressed against his chest, making it difficult to breathe. It had not started this way. Deacon had always been a man on the edge, a reformed con who had a habit of falling for the wrong women. Sheila had been the most recent in a long line of bad decisions, but there was something about her, something raw and unfiltered that drew him in. She was fire and venom, a storm wrapped in a woman's body, and he had enjoyed the danger of her. He assumed they had collaborated to create something. Late nights at the restaurant, her laughter echoing through the empty dining room as she told wild stories about her past. She was a survivor just like him. He'd convinced himself they were two broken pieces that fit together, no matter how jagged the edges were. And then there was Taylor. Taylor Hayes, with her quiet strength and gentle eyes, was everything Sheila was not. She'd unexpectedly returned to his life, at first as a friend, someone to talk to when the world felt too heavy. She'd been there to listen when he complained about Sheila's latest scheme, or how the Forresters still looked down on him. Taylor did not judge him, unlike the others. She saw the man he was attempting to become, not the one he had been. And that night when they were alone, when the wine flowed too freely and the lines between friendship and something more became blurred, he crossed a line he couldn't undo. It was not planned. It was never with him. They were laughing about an old memory one moment, and the next she had her hand on his, her eyes searching for something he couldn't identify. He had kissed her, or perhaps she had kissed him, it didn't matter. The attraction between them had been undeniable, a brief respite from the chaos of his life. But the morning after, when the haze of alcohol and desire had cleared, guilt hit him like a punch in the gut. Taylor had been gentle, telling them it didn't have to mean anything and that they could move on. But Deacon knew better. Nothing in his life ever remained simple. Sheila found out, of course. She always did. Her instincts were as sharp as a blade, and she could detect betrayal from a mile away. She confronted him in the restaurant, her voice low and dangerous, her eyes burning with a mix of hurt and rage. "You and Taylor?" she hissed, her words slicing through him. He tried to explain, to tell her it was a mistake, a moment of weakness, but Sheila wasn't interested in excuses. She threw the mug at the wall, shattering it, and then walked away without saying anything. That was it. There are no second chances, no forgiveness. Just the sound of the door slamming and the subsequent silence. Now he was alone again. Without Sheila's chaotic energy, the apartment felt too big and too quiet. He tried calling her and left voicemails that went unanswered. He'd even approached Taylor hoping for what? Absolution? Understanding? But Taylor had been distant, her kindness tempered by a wall she'd built to protect herself. "We made a mistake, Deacon," she said quietly, her gaze avoiding his. "Let's not make things worse." That was it. Two women, two bridges burned, and Deacon was left standing in the ashes. He stood up and paced the small area, his boots scuffing against the worn floorboards. The city of Los Angeles hummed outside, oblivious to his suffering. He reflected on the life he'd attempted to build here. A new beginning, a chance to be more than the misfit everyone expected him to be. He'd opened Il Giardino, poured his savings into it, and created a gathering place for people. He tried to be a good father to Hope, even though she'd grown up and no longer needed him. He tried to love Sheila, to see the good in her when no one else could. And he tried to be Taylor's friend, someone she could rely on. However, he consistently fell short. He couldn't stop thinking about that night with Taylor. Her gentle laugh, the way her hair fell across her face, and the warmth of her touch. It felt right in the moment, like a glimpse of something better than the life he had been leading. But it was not real. It was a fantasy, a momentary diversion from the reality. He was still the same old Deacon, making the same old mistakes. He had hurt Sheila, the only person who had seen him at his worst and still stayed. And he had hurt Taylor, who had trusted him not to add to her already complicated life. He sank back into the couch, head in his hands. The silence was deafening, interrupted only by the distant sound of a car horn outside. He considered calling Hope, but what would he say? That he had blown it again? That he'd lost 2 women who were important to him because he couldn't control his impulses? Hope had her own life and problems. She didn't want her father dragging her down with him. The hours passed, and the darkness outside intensified. Deacon did not turn on the lights. He let the shadows swallow him, mirroring those inside his head. He remembered Sheila's fire and how fiercely she loved him, even though it was messy. He reflected on Taylor's quiet strength, and how she made him feel like he could be more than he was. Both of them were gone, and he had only himself to blame. He stood up, agitated, and walked to the window. The city lights stretched out in front of him, a glittering reminder of all the lives that were taking place without him. He wondered where Sheila was now, most likely plotting something, her mind already on the next scheme. Perhaps she was also in pain, hiding it behind her tough exterior. And Taylor was probably at home, trying to make sense of what they'd done and rebuilding the walls he'd demolished. Deacon's phone buzzed on the table, and his heart raced for a moment, hoping it was Sheila. But it was only a text from one of his employees, inquiring about the restaurant's schedule. He ignored it. Work was the last thing on his mind. He wasn't sure how he'd face the restaurant tomorrow, knowing Sheila wouldn't be there and Taylor wouldn't stop by. Il Giardino had been their place in various ways, but it now felt like a graveyard of memories. He considered leaving, packing a bag, hopping on his bike, and riding until Los Angeles became a speck in his rearview mirror. He'd done it before. Start over in a new city with only his name and his mistakes. However, the thought made him tired. He was too old to keep running and too exhausted to start again. Besides, there was Hope. She was the one good thing he had done in his life, the only person who still believed in him, even though he didn't deserve it. The night went on and Deacon did not sleep. He sat on the couch, staring at the cracked mug, wondering how he'd let everything fall apart. He'd loved Sheila in his own broken way, and he cared more about Taylor than he knew. But love and care were insufficient when you kept repeating the same mistakes. He'd tried to be better, but perhaps some people are simply wired to fail. Deacon made a decision as dawn broke and a gray light shone through the window. He couldn't change what he'd done, but he could try to be better, for Hope, for himself, and perhaps even for the memory of his time with Sheila and Taylor. He would go to work, keep the restaurant open, and keep showing up. Maybe one day he'll learn how to stop breaking things. Perhaps one day he'll be the man he wished to be. But for now he was just Deacon Sharp, alone in his apartment, with a cracked mug and a heart full of regret. The night was quiet in Los Angeles, but there was a storm brewing inside Deacon's small apartment. He sat alone, staring at the half-empty glass of bourbon in his hand, despite the fact that the drink had long since become warm. He was not drinking for pleasure. He didn't even know why he had poured it. The weight in his chest was not something that alcohol could relieve. He was a man torn between 2 women, 2 paths, and 2 sides of himself. For months he had found unexpected solace with Sheila. He hadn't planned it, and most people would never understand. Sheila was chaos disguised as a smile, but she had demonstrated something no one else had: acceptance. She didn't expect him to be the perfect man, and she didn't judge his flaws. In her arms he found a refuge he never imagined possible. But love, or whatever fragile semblance of it they shared, was not based on solid foundations. Every day with her carried the risk of disaster, and every time he allowed himself to believe in her felt like a bet against everything he had been trying to rebuild in his life. Then came Taylor. Taylor Hayes, steady, compassionate, and infinitely forgiving. Taylor was the light to Sheila's fire. Where Sheila tempted him with passion, Taylor reminded him that he could still be good, and that his mistakes did not define him. He hadn't intended for it to happen, hadn't sought comfort in her arms. But one night, lost in conversation, the air between them shifted, and the moment swept them away. He had kissed her, and she had not pulled away. And before he could stop himself, he had crossed a line that he could never undo. Now, sitting in the dark, he replayed the night over and over. It was more than just a lapse in judgment. It marked a watershed moment. For all the good he saw in Sheila, for all the time she made him feel alive, the truth was undeniable. In Taylor's presence, his heart whispered something it could never say to Sheila. And he knew what he needed to do, even though the thought made him feel guilty. When Sheila entered the apartment later that evening, her smile was radiant. She carried a small bag of groceries and hummed as if the outside world didn't matter. She always carried herself with confidence, as if nothing could harm her, but Deacon saw what was beneath that armor. He recognized the desperate need for connection, and the fear of being left behind again. "Hey, lover," she said brightly, placing the bag on the counter. "I thought I'd surprise you with dinner. I figured we could stay in tonight. Just the two of us." Deacon forced a smile as his chest tightened. He wanted to hold on to this version of her, the one who tried and loved him in her own messy way. But if he kept doing it, he'd be lying to both her and himself. "Sheila," he said quietly, his voice already breaking. She paused, narrowing her eyes as if she could detect the heaviness in his tone. "What's wrong?" He swallowed hard, putting the glass down before his trembling hands revealed him. "We need to talk." The word struck her like a cold wind. She slowly straightened up, her jaw tightening as she crossed her arms. "What should we talk about?" He took a shaky breath. "About us. About what we're doing." Her expression changed, revealing a flash of fear before hardening into defiance. "Deacon, don't start this. We're good. We've been fine." He shook his head. "No, we aren't. Sheila, I care about you more than I ever thought possible. You were there for me when no one else was, and I will never forget it. But this isn't working. It can't work." Her voice sank to a raw, wounded whisper. "Are you leaving me?" The silence between them was thick and suffocating. He wanted to deny it, to take her into his arms and hide the truth, but he couldn't. He made his decision the moment he crossed the line with Taylor. "I can't keep doing this," he exclaimed, his voice breaking. "I've been lying to myself and you. I slept with Taylor." The room froze. Sheila's face turned pale, her eyes wide with disbelief. Then, like glass shattering, the pain turned to rage. "You what?" He looked down, unable to meet her gaze. "I did not intend for it to happen. It just did. And it made me realize that I can't keep leading you on. You deserve someone who is completely committed, and I am not that person for you." Sheila's hands trembled as she pressed them against the counter to steady herself. Her laughter was sharp and bitter. "Is that it? You throw everything away after one night with the good doctor? After what I've given you? After all the risks I've taken simply to be with you?" Her words cut deep, and she wasn't mistaken. She had risked everything to keep him, to create some semblance of a life together. But love based on desperation and danger could not endure. "I'm sorry," he whispered, barely audible. "I never wanted to hurt you." Her eyes welled up with tears, but she refused to let them fall. "Do you think saying sorry is enough? Do you think you can just walk away and leave me standing here like I'm nothing?" He finally met her gaze, his eyes filled with regret. "You aren't nothing, Sheila. You never were. But we can't keep pretending it's love. Not when I can't give you what you deserve." The air became denser with each passing second. Sheila's chest rose and fell as she struggled to control the storm within her. For once she didn't scream or lash out. She turned away, her shoulders trembling. "Go to her then," she said coldly, her voice cracking with the weight of her broken heart. "But don't come crawling back when she decides you're not worth saving." Her words stayed with Deacon long after she left the apartment, the sound of the door slamming echoing through his bones. He sat back down, face buried in his hands, heart ripped open. He had chosen honesty, but the consequences were more painful than he had anticipated. In the days that followed, Deacon sought solace in the belief that he had done the right thing. Taylor's presence was steady and comforting, but the shadow of what he had lost remained. Every time he saw Sheila's face in his mind, he was reminded of the woman behind the chaos, the one who laughed at his stupid jokes and believed in him when no one else did. He wondered if he had made the correct decision, or if he had simply exchanged one type of heartbreak for another. Taylor offered him redemption, but Sheila had given him a type of love he couldn't describe, wild, dangerous but genuine. And no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't hide the truth. His breakup with Sheila had left a hole in his heart that nothing seemed to fill. Life went on as it always did, but Deacon's nights remained heavy. He had gained something, but he had also lost something invaluable. And in the quiet, when the world was still, he thought about her, wondering if she hated him, if she missed him, or if she had already found someone else to fill the void he had created. What haunted him the most were not her angry eyes or her bitter words. It was the silence that followed. It was the expression of someone who had believed against all odds that she could be loved, only to see it fade away. And so Deacon lived with the decision he had made, which had liberated him but also bound him to a sorrow that would never go away. Weeks turned into months, and despite Deacon's efforts to move on, the ghost of Sheila lingered in every corner of his mind. He told himself he had chosen the path of redemption, and Taylor's consistent presence was proof that he was becoming the man he had always desired to be. But sometimes when Taylor smiled at him with that gentle compassion, he felt like an imposter, because a part of him remained in the fire he had abandoned. Late at night, when the city was quiet, he found himself staring at the ceiling, recalling how Sheila's laughter used to echo through the walls of his apartment. It wasn't always easy between them, but her embrace contained a raw truth that convinced him he wasn't beyond saving. With Taylor he felt worthy. With Sheila he felt alive. He happened to run into her outside Il Giardino one evening. She stood in the shadows, her hair falling around her shoulders, her gaze piercing his soul. For a moment neither spoke. The world appeared to hold its breath. Then she turned and walked away, her silhouette swallowed by the darkness. He wanted to call after her and ask for her forgiveness, but his voice failed him. That silent encounter haunted him more than any argument or the memory of her rage. It confirmed what he already knew. Some wounds would never heal, and some love stories would end in echoes rather than with closure. Deacon lived on, but a part of him remained in the empty space Sheila had left behind. And no matter how far he tried to flee toward redemption, the memory of her eyes in the dark would always haunt him.